wind howls off the dark waters of Salem Harbor and rattles the diamond-paned windows of an ancient wooden mansion. This structure stands as a blackened monument to a time when fear and superstition ruled the minds of men in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Dark clouds often gather above the high-peaked gables, like a shroud of judgment, waiting to fall upon the sinners below. The House of the Seven Gables is not merely a setting for a famous novel, but a physical vessel containing centuries of secrets and sorrow. Shadows stretch long across the manicured lawns as the sun dips below the horizon and leaves the heavy wooden facade in gloom. Visitors who step onto the grounds often report a sudden drop in temperature that chills them to the bone, regardless of the season. The air here feels thick with the unspoken guilt of generations past, and the restless spirits that refuse to move on from their earthly tether. Captain John Turner was a man of significant wealth and influence. When he first commissioned the building of this imposing residence in the year 1668, the framework was constructed from sturdy oak and pine that was felled in the primeval forests surrounding the settlement. It was a display of power and permanence in a new world that was fraught with uncertainty and danger. The original house consisted of just 2 rooms and a central chimney, but it quickly grew as the ambitions of the Turner family expanded. Gables were added and rooms were extended until the house became a labyrinth of hallways and chambers. The architecture itself seems to defy logic with its sharp angles and hidden recesses that harbored dust and silence. It was a home built to withstand the harsh New England winters, but it could not keep out the creeping darkness of the human heart. Nathaniel Hawthorne walked the streets of Salem during the mid-19th century with a heavy burden weighing upon his soul. He was a man deeply haunted by the legacy of his ancestors and the blood that stained his family name. His great-great-grandfather was John Hathorne, who served as the only judge in the Salem witch trials, who never repented for his actions. The weight of this connection pressed down on Nathaniel Hawthorne like a physical stone around his neck. He sought to distance himself from the cruelty of the past by adding the letter W to his surname. But the history was written in ink that could not be erased. The House of the Seven Gables became the focal point for his exploration of hereditary sin, and the idea that the wrongdoings of one generation echo through the ages to curse the next. The year 1692 stands as a black mark in the history of colonial America, where hysteria gripped the village of Salem. Innocent men and women were dragged from their homes and accused of signing the book of the devil. John Hathorne presided over these examinations with a cold and unyielding demeanor that terrified those who stood before him. He accepted spectral evidence and the hysterical cries of afflicted girls as irrefutable proof of guilt. 19 people were hanged on Gallows Hill, and one man was pressed to death under heavy stones because of the madness that men like Hathorne perpetuated. The screams of the condemned surely echoed in the mind of the judge long after the trials ended. But he remained stoic and unapologetic until his dying day. This lack of remorse created a spiritual wound that his descendant, Nathaniel Hawthorne, felt compelled to examine. One particular victim of the hysteria was a woman named Sarah Good, who was destitute and marginalized by the strict Puritan society. Before she was executed, she directed a chilling prophecy toward the Reverend Nicholas Noyes, who was another official involved in the trials. She declared that God would give him blood to drink if he took her life. This curse became a central element in the lore of Salem, and it deeply influenced the imagination of Nathaniel Hawthorne. He wove this real-life imprecation into the narrative of his novel and attributed it to the fictional wizard Matthew Mall. The line blurs between what was written in the pages of fiction and what was whispered in the frightened households of Salem. The curse of choking on one's own blood became a terrifying symbol of divine retribution for the sins of greed and pride. Nathaniel Hawthorne spent many hours visiting his cousin Susanna Ingersoll, who lived within the walls of the Turner Ingersoll Mansion. Susanna was a woman of keen intellect who knew the history of the house better than anyone else alive. She regaled her cousin with tales of the past and showed him the structural quirks of the old building. It was during these visits that the seed of the novel began to germinate in the fertile mind of the author. She told him that the house once boasted 7 gables before renovations removed some of them. This detail sparked his imagination and provided the title for his most famous work. The atmosphere inside the house during these visits was often somber and quiet, which allowed the ghosts of the past to whisper their stories to the receptive writer. One of the most unsettling features of the house is the secret staircase that winds its way up through the heart of the central chimney. This hidden passage was likely used to avoid detection or to move unseen between the floors during times of trouble. The air within this narrow shaft is stagnant and smells of ancient wood and dry rot. Susanna Ingersoll opened this secret way for Nathaniel Hawthorne and allowed him to climb into the darkness. The sensation of being enclosed within the very bones of the house must have been suffocating and eerie. It is easy to imagine the author pausing in the pitch-black silence and listening for the footfalls of long-dead residents. The staircase represents the hidden guilt that families try to conceal behind a facade of respectability. The attic of the house of the Seven Gables is a vast and cavernous space filled with the accumulation of centuries. Dust motes dance in the shafts of light that pierce through the small windows and illuminate the rough-hewn beams. It is a place where time seems to stand still, and the boundaries between the past and present become porous. Objects left behind by former inhabitants sit in shadow and wait for hands that will never touch them again. The creaking of the floorboards in the attic is often attributed to the settling of the house, but some claim it is the pacing of a restless spirit. The oppressive heat in the summer and the biting cold in the winter make the attic an inhospitable place for the living. It remains the domain of memories and perhaps something more sinister. Nathaniel Hawthorne populated his fictional version of the house with characters who were manifestations of his own inner turmoil. The villainous Judge Pynchon bears a striking resemblance to the real-life ancestor, John Hathorne. Through this character, the author was able to confront the evil that ran in his bloodline. Judge Pynchon is a man of high status and public esteem, but his soul is rotten with greed and malice. He seeks to obtain the deed to a vast tract of land in Maine, which mirrors the land hunger that drove many of the original settlers. The fiction serves as a mirror reflecting the ugly truth of the prominent families of Salem. The portrait of the colonel in the novel, which watches over the house, is said to hold the spirit of the original usurper. The curse of Matthew Mall in the novel is not just a plot device, but a representation of the real injustices suffered by the victims of the witch trials. In the story, the Pynchon family steals the land from Mall by accusing him of witchcraft and having him executed. This theft of land and life creates a stain on the property that no amount of wealth can wash away. The real history of Salem is filled with similar stories of neighbors turning against neighbors for personal gain. The ground upon which the house of the Seven Gables stands is soaked in this history of betrayal. Visitors today often feel a sense of unease as they walk the garden paths where the fictional Mall was said to be buried. The earth itself seems to remember the crimes committed in the name of righteousness. Strange phenomena have been reported by staff and visitors at the house of the Seven Gables for decades. Many people claim to see a man looking out from the upper windows when the house is supposed to be empty. He is described as wearing period clothing from the 18th century and watching the crowds with a stern expression. Some believe this could be the spirit of Captain John Turner checking on his property. Others speculated might be the shade of Nathaniel Hawthorne himself, returning to the scene of his inspiration. The figure never moves or speaks, but simply stares until he fades into the shadows. This silent watcher adds a layer of dread to the experience of touring the historic site. The feeling of being observed is a common complaint among those who linger too long in the rooms. A particular room in the house, known as the map room, has a reputation for intense paranormal activity. Cold spots that defy explanation move through the room and chill visitors instantly. There are reports of items moving on their own, and the sound of papers rustling when no windows are open. This room was a place of business and planning for the maritime activities of the Turner family. Perhaps the energy of anxious captains and worried merchants still resonates within these walls. The intensity of the focus required to navigate the treacherous seas may have left a psychic imprint on the space. Guides often hurry groups through this room as the atmosphere can become oppressive and heavy without warning. It is a place where the air feels charged with static electricity. The fictional character of Alice Pynchon is one of the most tragic figures in the novel, and her ghost is said to haunt the house. In the story, she is mesmerized by the grandson of Matthew Mall and eventually dies from the psychological torment. Legend says that the sound of a harpsichord can sometimes be heard drifting from the parlor. Alice was known for her musical talent, and the ghostly music is believed to be her sorrowful lament. The notes are faint and melancholy, and they fade away as soon as one tries to locate their source. This auditory hallucination brings the tragedy of the novel into the realm of reality. It serves as a reminder of the innocent lives that were destroyed by the vendettas of powerful men. Clifford Pynchon is another character who embodies the theme of a life wasted by false accusation and imprisonment. He returns to the house as a broken man who is hypersensitive to the world around him. His fragility mirrors the delicate state of the human psyche when it is subjected to prolonged trauma. Nathaniel Hawthorne understood the damage that isolation and guilt could inflict on the mind. The gloomy interior of the house, with its dark wood paneling and low ceilings, reflects Clifford's internal state. Visitors can almost feel the crushing weight of his despair in the dim corners of the parlor. The house acts as a prison for Clifford, just as the past acted as a prison for Hawthorne. The walls seem to close in on anyone who spends too much time inside. The garden outside the house offers a stark contrast to the dark interior, but it too holds its own secrets. The novel describes Mall's well as a spring of water that turned brackish and foul after the wizard's execution. The real garden is a beautiful arrangement of period-appropriate flowers and herbs, but the legend of the cursed water persists. Shadows seem to cling to the foliage, even when the sun is high in the sky. The gnarled roots of ancient trees twist into shapes that resemble grasping hands. It is said that if one looks into the reflective surface of the water, they might see the face of the wizard staring back. The natural world in Salem is never just scenery, but a participant in the unfolding drama of the supernatural. Hepzibah Pynchon is the scowling spinster who opens a scent shop in the house to support her impoverished brother. Her character represents the decay of aristocracy and the desperate need to adapt to a changing world. The shop still exists in the museum today, and visitors can stand where the fictional Hepzibah struggled with her pride. The sound of the shop bell ringing on its own is a common occurrence reported by the staff. It is as if a ghostly customer has entered to purchase a gingerbread man or a string of beads. This playful poltergeist activity contrasts with the darker energy found elsewhere in the house. It suggests that not all the spirits are malevolent, but some are simply repeating the mundane tasks of their daily lives. The distinction between the real Turner Ingersoll Mansion and the fictional house of the Seven Gables is intentionally blurred. Nathaniel Hawthorne used the physical structure as a skeleton and fleshed it out with his own dark imagination. However, the emotions he poured into the book were very real and derived from his family history. This merging of fact and fiction has created a unique energy vortex where the imagined ghosts seem just as real as the historical ones. Visitors come looking for the Pynchons, but they walk in the footsteps of the Turners and the Ingersolls. The layers of history and storytelling have fused together to create a complex haunting. The house exists in a liminal space between the material world and the world of literature. During the writing of the novel, Nathaniel Hawthorne was living in Lenox, Massachusetts, in a small red cottage. He described the process of writing the book as a descent into hell where he wrestled with his demons. The story consumed him, and he felt the presence of his ancestors looking over his shoulder. He wrote with a feverish intensity to exorcise the guilt that had plagued him since his youth. The finished work is a masterpiece of Gothic literature, but it came at a high personal cost. Hawthorne often felt drained and melancholy. After spending so much time in the dark world he created, the House of the Seven Gables was not just a story to him, but a confession and a plea for forgiveness. The dining room of the mansion is set with period china and silver, as if waiting for a dinner party that will never begin. It is in this room that the fictional Judge Pynchon meets his grisly end. He dies of a hemorrhage while sitting in the great ancestral chair and fulfills the curse of having blood to drink. The chair remains empty and roped off from the public, but it commands the attention of everyone who enters. There is a palpable sense of dread surrounding this piece of furniture. Many claim to feel a sudden wave of nausea or dizziness when standing near it. It is as if the psychic residue of the fictional death has manifested in the real world. The line between the story and reality vanishes in the presence of the chair. Children are often more sensitive to the paranormal than adults, and many young visitors have reported seeing a boy in the attic. They describe him as playing with old-fashioned toys and wearing breeches and a loose shirt. The boy does not seem aware of the modern tourists and continues his game in silence. When the children point him out to their parents, the space is always empty. This apparition is believed to be the spirit of a Turner child who died young and never left his home. His presence adds a poignant note to the otherwise grim atmosphere of the house. It is a reminder that families lived and loved and lost within these walls for generations. The exterior of the house is clad in dark clapboards that have weathered centuries of storms. The sheer size of the structure is intimidating, with its multiple roof lines and towering chimneys. At night, the house looks like a sleeping beast waiting to wake up. The windows reflect the moonlight like unblinking eyes staring out at the harbor. Locals often avoid walking past the house late at night due to the heavy feeling that emanates from it. It is a place that demands respect and fear in equal measure. The architecture itself is designed to dominate the landscape and impress upon the viewer the wealth of the owner. But now it serves as a warning about the impermanence of human vanity. Inside the house, the hallways are narrow, and the floorboards are uneven from centuries of use. Navigating the interior requires one to pay attention to every step. The layout is confusing with rooms leading into other rooms in a haphazard manner. This disorientation is part of the charm, but also part of the horror. It is easy to feel lost, even when one is just a few feet from the exit. The shadows in the corners seem to move and shift when you turn your head. Peripheral vision becomes unreliable in the dim light of the mansion. The house plays tricks on the mind and makes one question what is real and what is imagined. Nathaniel Hawthorne eventually left Salem and served as a consul in Liverpool, but he could never truly escape his heritage. The town of Salem and its dark history followed him wherever he went. The house of the Seven Gables remained a fixed point in his psychological landscape. He had exposed the secrets of his family to the world, and in doing so, he immortalized their shame. The success of the novel ensured that the story of the curse would be told for generations to come. It was a double-edged sword that brought him fame, but also cemented his connection to the witch trials. He had tried to wash the blood from his hands, but instead he painted a masterpiece with it. The legacy of the Salem witch trials is inextricably linked to the house, thanks to Hawthorne's narrative. Tourists flock to Salem every October to celebrate the macabre history of the town. The House of the Seven Gables is a centerpiece of this dark tourism. People come hoping to see a ghost or feel the chill of the supernatural. They bring their cameras and voice recorders in an attempt to capture evidence of the afterlife. The house tolerates this intrusion with a stoic silence. It has seen generations come and go, and it will likely see many more. The commercialization of the tragedy does not diminish the genuine sorrow that permeates the site. There is a particular mirror in the parlor that is said to be a portal for spirits. The glass is old and wavy and distorts the reflection of anyone who looks into it. Legend has it that if you stare long enough, you will see the faces of the Pynchons standing behind you. Some visitors have reported seeing a dark figure looming over their shoulder in the reflection. When they turn around, the room is empty. Mirrors have long been associated with the supernatural, and this one is no exception. It acts as a trap for the souls that cannot find their way out of the house. The distorted images it reflects are a metaphor for the twisted history of the family. The connection to the sea is vital to understanding the history of the house and its hauntings. The Turners were merchants who made their fortune from the ocean. The sea is a graveyard for many sailors, and the house is filled with items brought back from distant lands. These objects may carry attachments from their places of origin. The exotic woods and fabrics tell stories of trade and adventure, but also of exploitation. The ghosts of the sea may mingle with the ghosts of the land within the mansion. The sound of the wind whistling through the gables often sounds like the rigging of a ship in a storm. The house is a ship grounded on the shores of history. Preservationists have worked hard to maintain the house of the Seven Gables and keep it standing for future generations. It is a constant battle against rot and decay and the ravages of time. Every repair reveals new layers of the structure's history. Hidden shoes have been found in the walls, which were placed there as superstitious tokens to ward off evil. These discoveries prove that the original inhabitants lived in a world where magic and the supernatural were real threats. The fear of witches and demons was a daily reality for the people who built this house. Their protective charms are now museum artifacts, but they speak of a deep and primal fear. The haunting of the house of the Seven Gables is not just about jump scares or transparent figures. It is a psychological haunting that seeps into the mind of the observer. It is the weight of history and the knowledge of the suffering that occurred in Salem. It is the realization that human beings are capable of terrible cruelty in the name of justice. Nathaniel Hawthorne understood this better than anyone. He used the ghost story format to explore the darkest corners of the human condition. The true ghost is the memory of the injustice that can never be fully rectified. The house stands as a witness to the fragility of truth. As the tour of the house concludes, visitors are led back out into the garden and the fresh air. The contrast between the stifling interior and the open sky is jarring. Many people report feeling a sense of relief as they leave the building. It is as if a heavy weight has been lifted from their shoulders, but the feeling of the house lingers long after they have driven away. The image of the black gables against the sky remains etched in the memory. The story of the curse and the blood to drink echoes in the mind. The house of the Seven Gables does not let go of its guests easily. The sun sets over Salem, and the shadows lengthen once more to swallow the old mansion. The tourists have gone, and the gates are locked for the night. Inside the house, the silence returns, but it is not an empty silence. It is a silence filled with the whispers of the past and the creaking of floorboards under unseen feet. The spirits of the Turners and the Ingersolls and the fictional Pynchons resume their vigil. They are bound to this place by history and by the words of a guilt-ridden author. The house of the Seven Gables stands as a dark jewel in the crown of Salem, waiting for the next dawn. The final thought that plagues the mind is the endurance of the curse itself. Did Nathaniel Hawthorne succeed in breaking the cycle of guilt by writing his novel? Or did he simply give it a new form? The house remains, and the stories remain. The blood of the ancestors still flows in the veins of the living. The sins of the fathers are visited upon the children unto the third and fourth generation. This biblical warning hangs over the house like the gables themselves. The evil that was done in Salem has left a scar that time cannot heal. The house is the physical manifestation of that scar. Ultimately, the house of the Seven Gables is a testament to the power of storytelling. A wooden structure has become a legendary site because of the words written by one man. The ghosts are sustained by the imagination of the readers and the visitors. As long as people read the book and visit the house, the spirits will continue to walk. We keep them alive with our fear and our curiosity. We invite them into our minds and let them haunt us. The house is a mirror reflecting our own fascination with the macabre. And in the dark reflection, we see the face of humanity,